Okay, good morning. Today will be my final day of sharing readings with the community here, so I just wanted to finish with two very inspiring stories from the biography of two of the great Kruba Ajahns, meditation masters, and these two are two that I've always found particularly inspiring. This first one is a short biography of the Kruba Ajahn named Ajahn Tongrat, and he was a disciple of Ajahn Mun. And this short biography was told to the monks of Wat Nanachat when they went to pay respects to a monk named Lumpu Gi who had lived with Ajahn Tongrat. Ajahn Tongrat Kantasilo was a disciple of Lumpu Man Bodhisattva and Lumpu Sao Kantasilo. He was of the same generation of disciples as Ajahn Singh Kantayamo and Ajahn Du Achaladamo. He was born at Sampong village and ordained at the village monastery. He stayed there 5 pansas and learned the Patimokkha. However, he still had some doubts regarding the Vinaya. Because he couldn't understand the meaning of some of the rules, he began to search for a Kruba Ajahn who could clarify the matter. After hearing of the reputations of Lumpu Man and Lumpu Sao, he set off traveling to pay respects to, study with, and converse with them. Both the teachers explained the essentials of correct practice in line with Dhamma and Vinaya, from the Patasompot, a 19th century Thai commentarial classic in verse form, and the Vinaya texts, until Venerable Tongrat understood. He was so satisfied with the explanations that he asked to become their disciple and stay at their monastery. Both of the Venerable Ajahns trained him, instructing him to practice in accordance with the Vinaya in all its details. Concerning the practice of meditation, bhavana, Lumpu Man and Lumpu Sao recommended that Venerable Tongrat go and find a place in the forest suitable for bhavana, especially a place with tigers or that was rumored to have a malevolent ghost. The best would be a cremation ground that had corpses carried in each day, so that the heart would become unwaveringly firm and Dhamma would quickly arise. They recommended that he study the Buddhist texts Visuddhimagga and Mun Mahakan. These were to be studied only in order to have a well-rounded understanding, not to be memorized in order to give Dhamma talks. Both of the Ajahns reiterated, quote, "Don't go giving Dhamma talks, Venerable Tong. First meditate until you're accomplished in bhavana. If you're in too much of a hurry to give Dhamma talks, the Dhamma inside won't have a chance to do any teaching." Ajahn Tongrat then practiced, strictly following their advice. Life in the jungle was one of extreme impoverishment. The 4 requisites were in short supply. There were no cups, no kettles. He had to use a section of bamboo and drill a hole in it to thread a shoulder strap. He had to filter his drinking water. On alms round, he'd only get plain rice. When it was time to eat, he chewed it thoroughly. On those days when he'd get 1 banana, he'd be elated. The villagers weren't very clued in. Generally, they understood that meditation monks didn't eat meat and that they only ate sesame seeds like people from India. He'd go on alms round to 4 or 5 houses, get enough rice to fill him up, and then quit. He didn't have a glut. If there were lots of mosquitoes, then he would cover himself with his robe folded in half. The sangati, which is the monk's outer robe, was used in place of a pillow or blanket. Sometimes he would sleep with his head resting on a tree root or on his own fist. On those times when he'd stay near where the villagers threshed their rice, he could ask for some old rice stalks to roll up in a bundle, cover it with a folded cloth, and use that as a pillow. If a villager happened by, he could help by breaking off a branch so the leaves could be used. He would even take some vines, tie them up together, and cover them with a bathing cloth, and that would substitute for a pillow. Lying down, he would focus on his bhavana. Sometimes the water buffalo herders would pass by. And finding him sitting in the cremation ground, they'd tease and make fun of him in various ways. Quote, "Is this monk crazy or what? He's been sitting here for 2 or 3 days." Some people would approach, bow to him, then, pretending to be serious, ask in jest, "Would you like to chew some betel nut? Do you smoke cigarettes, Ajahn?" Ajahn would respond, "If there is some, I chew it. If not, I don't. If there are any, I smoke them. If not, I don't." This is just one example, but they were just asking to ask. Not once did they actually offer him anything. There were a few occasions when some villagers would come and request Dhamma teachings. Quote, "Teach us some Dhamma, Venerable. I'm still new to the practice. My Krubajans won't allow me to give Dhamma talks yet." "Well, what about that book you've got there? Give us a Dhamma teaching from the book." They gave me this book simply for me to read, telling me not to use it for Dhamma talks. They told me to wait for the Dhamma inside to express itself, then start teaching others, he explained to the villagers, in the same way as his Krubajans had stressed so emphatically with him. He did, however, give the villagers the 5 precepts, so that they would be satisfied with having made merit. Venerable Tongrat practiced and developed meditation like this for 4 years. Only very rarely did he go to pay respects to his teachers, and then for only 2 or 3 days, or maybe a week. Once he'd heard some Dhamma teachings, they'd chase him back out there to meditate, and the places they'd send him to were all fear-inspiring. Staying in the forest for extended periods of time, his possessions became old and worn. His bathing cloth was ripped. His robe was disintegrating. No one offered to provide him with requisites, and he didn't have any relatives there. He couldn't ask lay people to provide things because it was against the Vinaya. So when his robes ripped, he'd mend them. There were patches everywhere. He spent a lot of time sewing, and the thread he'd brought with him ran out. When he found some yellow bark on a tree that had recently died, he'd take a knife and gently pare it off. Once the bark was stripped off, he'd weave it into the robe. Each time he bathed, he had to wait until there were no women in the area. He'd bathe in the forest, hopping just like a frog. As things got increasingly worse, Venerable Tongrat began to think of his home. He missed his 2 younger sisters and his older brother, a government official at Sampong village. He came up with the idea to return and spend the pansa at his home village. That way he could ask for some cloth from his younger sister. But when he went to respectfully present the idea to his 2 teachers, Lumpu Man immediately scolded him. "Ha, so you said you wanted to receive some Dhamma from the teachers Mun and Sao, but after a little bit of practice you get homesick. Your house's pillars at Sampong are firmly sunk into the earth. Whenever you go back, they'll be there for you to see. What's difficult is this practice of Dhamma, that is, if you haven't yet realized Dhamma. Your house, it's just the same as it always was. You want to attain Magga, Pala. Do you think that longing for your home while meditating will do the trick?" His Krubajin repeated this 2 or 3 times in a similar manner. Fearing further reprimands from his teacher, Tongrat took leave and returned to meditate for a few days. Taking into consideration how his teacher spoke to him, he reflected on what the best thing to do would be. Once he thought it through, he went back to pay respects again. "Excuse me, Venerable Sir, where are you going to have me spend pansa this year? It's already July, so please give the matter some consideration." Lumpu Man sat and focused his mind internally, then said, "Prutboat Cave, Tan Tong. Go and stay at Prutboat Cave, all right?" "Prutboat Cave? Everyone who goes and stays there dies. If they don't die, they go mad. They become crippled. That's what they say. How can you send me there to stay? What will protect me?" "The 4 Brahma Viharas. This is what should be done. Can you handle it, Tantong?" "Yes, sir." "Okay, that's the spirit. May your practice progress, Tantong." That pansa there was no choice but to go stay at Prutboat Cave. He stayed in the cavern, meditating in solitude. If he heard the sound of owls calling each other, he'd lay down to sleep. The forest birds signaled the beginning of a new day when they left to look for food, calling out to each other. Emerging from the cave, he'd walk cross-country through the mist about 4 kilometers, and then some, before he reached the place for going on alms round. If he walked briskly, he could get there in an hour. Walking slowly, it took longer than that. Time rolled by until the full moon of September. Traditionally, on full moon days, the villagers would go to the monastery to make merit. It was a bright, clear night as Venerable Tongrat sat in meditation inside the cave. At that moment there occurred a loud noise, loud crashing sounds. Fear began to arise. What could those possibly be stomping down the mountainside towards him? Whatever they were, when they reached the mouth of the cave, they jumped down, grabbed each other, and began to wrestle. Their deafening yells reverberated throughout the mountain, and it shook as if it were about to collapse. Venerable Tongrat thought he'd go and have a look to see what was making the noise. He almost went. Then he thought, if I go out there, I'll probably die just like all the others in the stories I've heard. Furthermore, whatever they're doing, that's their own business. Whether it's an animal, a ghost, or an evil spirit, it's not my business. I came here to meditate, so I'll just carry on with my practice. We don't have to have anything to do with each other. Once he considered it in this way, he could continue on focusing his mind, but every hair was standing on end. He sat there watching his mind. From that moment on, Venerable Tongrat's meditation became truly accomplished. The Dhamma gushed forth. As the Dhamma arose, so did an irresistible desire to teach the Dhamma, so he sat there all alone, giving a Dhamma talk. For 7 days and 7 nights he continued on. Even if someone had tried to sew his mouth shut, the needle probably would have broken, or else his mouth would have ripped. He was proclaiming the dispensation of the Lord Buddha. He thundered against the corrupt monks of his time, especially those who abused positions of power. It wasn't enough just to teach within the borders of Thailand, so as he taught, his words reached foreign lands as well, Malaysia, England, and other Western countries. The Dhamma teachings flowed forth. Each day he only ate 3 bites of food, 1 for the Buddha, 1 for the Dhamma, and 1 for the Sangha. He taught untiringly, with no need of sleep. Completely alone, he gave Dhamma talks day and night like a maniac, getting thinner all the time. Tanajan, are you feeling sick? A layman asked him on alms round. No. Are you able to eat all right? Just fine. Suspicious, the layman thought to himself. I can't believe that if he's able to eat, that he's not sick. He's so thin his eyes have sunk in deeply. I'd better follow him and have a look. The man secretly followed Venerable Tongrat back, and sure enough he saw the monk eat just 3 mouthfuls of food, 1 for the Buddha, 1 for the Dhamma, and 1 for the Sangha. The layman then protested, how can you tell me you have no problem eating, that you're not sick? You only eat 3 bites. You're so thin your eyes are hollow and empty. Why did you deceive me? Listening to the man, Tanajan reconsidered. With his hair standing on end, he suddenly realized, I misled him, and he returned to focusing awareness on his citta. From that time on, his heart had reached fulfillment, but he still had this desire to give Dhamma talks. He eagerly awaited the end of the Pansa so he could go tell Lumpur Mun. It was only 2 days after the end of Pansa before he arrived to see his teacher and recount all his experiences. He described the various states of mind that had occurred and all that had taken place. Once he finished telling his story, Lumpur Mun concluded, that's good, Tan Tong. Your citta is now at the same level as my own. Now you can teach, Venerable Tong. Teach to your heart's content. Uncover your platter of rice for all to see. Teach the Dhamma. There's now no need to fear teaching. Reveal it all, just as if you were serving a feast. From that point on, Ajahn Tongrat wandered about looking for situations to teach the Dhamma. Around the villages of Tanton and Pujan, there were large communities and large audiences for his Dhamma talks. At that time, he became a constant companion of Lumpur Sao. He felt a debt of gratitude to his teacher for all he'd given him. Whenever Lumpur Sao asked him to accompany him, he'd go. Wherever he was asked to stay, he'd stay. Having gone to Ubon, Lumpur Sao requested Ajahn Tongrat to spend the Pansa at Situan, saying, there are many good people there. There are many bad as well. Until Lumpur Sao's passing away, Ajahn Tongrat attended on and served him. When I later asked Ajahn Tongrat about his practice experiences during that 10th Pansa in Pratbot Cave, the answer was brief, quote, it was like I had climbed to the top of the tallest tree. There was nowhere else to go. He asked, how would you describe the citta of a person who has finished their spiritual work? Sati, passaddhi, mindfulness and tranquility, Sati is ever present. The deep peace of passaddhi is ever present. In the citta there are no thoughts of harming. It's just like a water buffalo that has been trained to plow the rice paddies. When it's time to turn around, it turns by itself. You don't have to pull on its rope much. For anyone who's cared for their citta to this extent, the citta then takes care of itself. Okay, so that's the first story I'd like to read, and then now I'd like to just finish with one other short, also very inspiring story. This story is a little bit more, a little bit more lighthearted, and I've always found this particular story to just be, just very fun, entertaining kind of story to read, but also just incredibly inspiring. And this comes from the book Sons of the Buddha by Kamala, the same author who wrote Forest Recollections that I was reading from earlier. And this is a story from the early life of a meditation master named Ajahn Jumnien. And as a little bit of background, his father had been a forest monk for a number of years and had very advanced, was a very advanced meditator, and his mother was also a very accomplished meditator. And this is the story of when his parents taught him how to meditate when he was a child. Ajahn Jumnien says that his father began teaching him to meditate before he was 4 years old. But as a child, the Ajahn says, quote, "I was too lazy to practice meditation." He preferred to run around and fly kites rather than sit still and learn to meditate. But the boy did not have a choice. His father made him practice meditation and tried to convince him of its benefits. Quote, "When your mind is able to achieve total concentration, you will study well, remember things right, and think clearly. Whatever you do, you will get results quickly. And if you achieve higher levels of concentration, you will be able to display supernatural powers." When Jumnien first heard that meditation could lead to the acquisition of magical powers, he got excited. Quote, "I wanted to go back in time," the Ajahn tells us, "to read people's minds and to develop the divine eye and the divine ear. I thought it was going to be great to learn how to meditate." His father began by telling Jumnien to meditate on the mantra Bhutto. When Jumnien asked what Bhut and Do meant, his father explained, "The word Bhut means to know, and the word Do means to be blissful. You have to have knowledge to be blissful. Do not be discouraged." Both his father and mother forced him to practice meditation. Quote, "As I was sitting there concentrating on the mantra, Bhutto, Bhutto, I would get antsy. I got tired and itchy and wanted to do anything other than sit there concentrating on my breath and the mantra. On one occasion, when Jumnien found it hard to concentrate on Bhutto, he started thinking about how much fun it would be to go out and fly a kite. Then he heard his father, who had been watching him, saying, 'Jumnien, don't go thinking about flying a kite or I'll slap your head. Just breathe in and concentrate on Bhut, breathe out and concentrate on Do. That's all you should be thinking about.' Wondering how his father could possibly have known that he was thinking about flying a kite, Jumnien decided to think about something else instead. He began thinking about climbing up to the highest branch of a tree near the pond and jumping off into the water. Quote, 'At first I will dive in head first,' Jumnien mused, 'and then I'll tuck my knees up to my stomach, make myself as round as a ball, and do a flying coconut. That'll be so much fun.' Just then his father spoke up again. 'Jumnien, don't think about climbing up a tree and jumping into the water. You must concentrate on Bhutto, Bhutto.' 'Yikes,' Jumnien said to himself, 'how does father know what I am thinking, no matter where my mind goes? This is something worth learning. If I master this knowledge, I can know what my friends are thinking. They won't be able to play tricks on me anymore.' These thoughts gave Jumnien an incentive to become proficient at meditation, but despite his desire, he was still too lazy to practice. His mind, the Ajahn tells us, began to wander again, and this time he started thinking about how much fun it would be to make a toy drum and bang on it. Bang, bang, bang. Imagining this was a lot more fun than thinking, Buto, Buto. But then once again he heard his father's voice. Don't you go thinking about beating a drum or I'll beat your head. Afraid of his father's punishment, Jumnien returned to breathing in But and breathing out Do. Under his father's supervision, Jumnien practiced meditation regularly. One day, Pet told his wife that he would be gone for 2 days to look after some patients. When he was a young monk, Pet had learned a great deal about traditional medicine. He reminded his wife to make sure that Jumnien did his meditation practice without fail. Quote, be sure to watch over him. Don't let him think about other things. Well, Jumnien thought, once father leaves, I'll have it made. I'm sure mother won't be able to read my mind the way father does. On the first day his father left around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, Jumnien's mother reminded him to meditate. Quote, I sat down to meditate as she requested, musing with a smile on my face, Mother has no idea what I'm thinking when I meditate. Why bother with Buto, Buto? Instead, I thought about building the biggest kite I have ever seen and flying it. Jumnien, his mother shouted, your father told you to meditate, not to think about flying kites. Hey, the boy thought, Mother must know when I'm thinking about kites. I better think about something else to trick her. Jumnien began thinking about making a toy cow out of a coconut leaf. Once I finish it, I will drag the cow by its nose into the water in the canal. Jumnien, his mother interrupted, don't think about making a toy cow to play with in the water. You better be thinking, Buto, Buto. Otherwise, you're going to get a slap on the head when your father comes home, because I'm not going to lie to him. Too bad, Jumnien thought. It looks like mother is just as good as father at reading my thoughts. Mother probably knew best, the Ajahn later remembered, thinking at the time. Whatever I was thinking about, mother already knew it. I figured it was because mother was already accomplished at meditation, so she probably knew what I was thinking as well as father did. Jumnien decided that if he couldn't think about other things, then meditation was not going to be any fun at all. Quote, I was mad at my mother and father, so I decided to sit there and think about dying. I just sat there thinking, dying, dying, dying. That was the only thing that I thought about. After a while, he heard his mother ask, Son, what are you thinking about? The boy did not answer. Ajahn Jumnien recalled, I just sat there thinking about dying. I did not think about playing, just about dying. My mother kept saying that she could not hear what I was thinking and kept asking me what was going through my mind. When my mother realized that she wasn't going to find out what I was thinking, she went around asking our neighbors and our relatives if they had secretly taught me this meditation. When she couldn't get any answers, Jumnien's mother decided that she would have to wait for her husband to come home and have him figure out what their son was up to. Jumnien sat there in meditation until dawn. When Pet returned early that morning to pick up more medicine for his patients, he saw his son sitting perfectly still. Pet asked his wife, Ta, did Jumnien meditate all night long? Yes, his wife replied. He started sitting in the evening and kept at it past sunrise. I called him to come and eat, but he wouldn't get up. Upon hearing that, Pet went over to Jumnien, sat down behind him, and began gently patting Jumnien on the head. After a moment or two, he turned to his wife and asked, Who came here and taught our child the Maranasati? Why has he kept doing Maranasati? Maranasati? Ta asked incredulously. Pet replied, Yes, Maranasati, mindfulness of death. As a former Tudong monk, Pet had practiced Maranasati meditation. Little Jumnien, however, had never heard of Maranasati and had no idea what it meant. The boy thought that he had finally fooled his father. Quote, I was saying, dying, 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 and he says I was saying Maranasati. Before, my father and mother were always right at guessing what I was thinking. How come today they don't know what I'm thinking? The more Jumnien thought about this, the more puzzling it became. Was my father drunk? All night I simply thought, dying, dying. Even though I was sore from sitting and I started to itch and got hungry, I kept thinking, dying, dying, dying. There were a couple of moments when I noticed that my heart had skipped a beat or two. I thought that I might really be dying. I became frightened and thought if I did die at that moment, I would go straight to hell. King Yama, the Lord of Death, would be waiting there to grab me and throw me into a pot of boiling water. The Ajahn recalled that when he was a child, he had frequently stomped on crabs, crickets, ants, and beetles. Quote, I had cut short the life of many living creatures. so the thought that I might die right then and there and go straight to hell really scared me. But I was also worried that if I did not die, then I would be forced by my parents to keep practicing meditation. I couldn't make up my mind. Was it better to die or not? Once again, Jumnien went back to meditating on dying. Quote, even while mosquitoes bit me and I got hungry and got sore from sitting, I still kept thinking the same thing, dying, dying, dying. There was a time toward dawn when Jumnien wanted to get up from meditating, but he also wanted to just keep sitting there. He decided to continue meditating. Quote, if I run into King Yama at the gates of hell, then I'll stop the meditation and get up. Around noon of that day, the Ajahn recalled, my heart started racing and then skipping beats. I wanted to see if getting up would stop this, but then my mind became one-pointed. There was happiness, emptiness, and clarity. There was no me, there was no King Yama, no heavens, no male or female deities, nothing at all. Jumnien was aware that his father and mother were talking, but he did not know what they were saying. Quote, I couldn't hear anything clearly. I was only certain that my mind was clear and calm. A smile broke out across my face. Ta called out to her husband, what is wrong with our child? He's smiling. What do you suppose he is thinking about now? Pet came over to look at Jumnien and said, he has entered his absorbed concentration, but this is not the path to Nibbana. My father was right, the Ajahn tells us, because after I stopped meditating, everything was just still and calm, but it wasn't the path to Nibbana. How could it be? I did not see Lord Buddha or Arahants or deities. There was just emptiness and a feeling of happiness. Then his parents began pleading with Jumnien to get up. This they knew would break his absorbed concentration. Quote, but I did not want to let go of the happiness, the Ajahn recalled. I was afraid that if I got up, this happiness that I had discovered would disappear forever. I thought that it would be better to stay like this for a month or a year. By now it was past the noontime meal. Jumnien's mother tried another tactic. In her sweetest voice, she said, Jumnien, out of gratitude to your mother, please listen to me. When Jumnien heard the word gratitude, he began to lose his resolve. Quote, since I love mother very much and always have sympathy for her, what can I do? Finally, Jumnien spoke to her. If I open my eyes and this happiness disappears, then what will I do? He asked. His mother replied, you will be able to find that happiness again, son. Jumnien realized then that he was being stupid and that if he wanted to, he could meditate anytime. Quote, I realized that in the future, whenever I finished my chores around the house, I could meditate to my heart's content. So Jumnien opened his eyes. Quote, it became apparent to me, the Ajahn later remarked, that the happiness I felt was about halfway gone. I also started to feel a bit like my old self again. When we sat down to eat together after taking the first bite of food, I started to feel warm and had a very heavy feeling. The happiness was all gone. My heart started to yearn for the bliss I had felt. I really missed that bliss now. It was a better feeling than anything I had ever experienced. After that, Jumnien felt the need to get away and meditate in solitude. He came up with a trick to ward off intruders. He went off to a cemetery to be alone. Unlike other people, Jumnien was not afraid of ghosts, since his father, an expert in herbal medicine, had often sent him to collect medicinal plants that grew near the forest cemetery. Quote, I didn't want anybody to follow me, so I brought along a string and tied it to some branches. Whenever anyone came near, I started yanking on the string, and the rustling of the branches scared off all visitors. But alas, Father was not afraid of ghosts. As he got closer and closer, he noticed the string and followed it along until he reached the place where I was sitting. As soon as he discovered me, he started to slap me. I jumped up and ran back to the house. Pet shouted after his son, I don't want you to sit in the cemetery ever again. To the former Tudong monk, the boy was too young to practice mindfulness of death. Pet was afraid that once out of his parents' sight, Jumnien would again take up the Maranasati meditation on his own. Father, please do not hit me, Jumnien pleaded. I am only trying to get back to that feeling of bliss. Pet's fear was not unfounded. By reciting, dying, 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 Jumnien's mind had reached a very peaceful meditative state. He experienced a pure mind that was incredibly blissful. but bliss can be addictive, and the boy was determined to recover that peaceful state of mind. He had not understood what had happened to him. Quote, "It's funny," he thought, "I was just thinking about dying in a sarcastic sort of way, yet I was able to experience emptiness and peace. I knew that the happiness I had was something I would long for whenever I wasn't able to meditate." Ever since that time, the Ajahn said, I have tried to discipline myself to meditate. Usually I went back to the cemetery to meditate so that I wouldn't be bothered by anyone. Others ventured into the cemetery only when it was absolutely necessary. Quote, "When I was alone," the Ajahn said, "I had a profound experience that was rejuvenating and happiness that could be compared only to the pure happiness that I felt from the love I had for my mother. I did not love my father, brothers, or sisters as much as I loved my mother." As the days passed, it became part of Jumnien's routine to meditate as soon as he woke up. Quote, "Then in the afternoon, whenever I was free from doing chores, I would again practice meditating. I always looked for a way to go off and practice without being disturbed. I felt that if I could find that place of bliss again, I might not ever get up from my meditation. This was the result of my parents having forced me to practice meditation." Okay, I'll just leave it there for today. And are there any questions that anyone would like to ask today?
Morning, Ajahn.
Good morning.
What is Pansa?
So the Pansa is the rains retreat. So traditionally in Thailand, that will be the time of the year when they get most of their rain. So for the three months, usually starting around July or so, in Southeast Asia is when the rainy season will begin. So they have very heavy monsoon rains that will be kind of arising during that time. And so the Buddha made it actually like a rule that the monks during that time have to stay in one place. So the monks aren't supposed to be traveling around during that period of time. So even here, in all of the monasteries in our tradition, we follow that same rule. So usually starting around July or so, the monks who are here will stay here, for the next 3 months. And so it's kind of like a period of, retreat, oftentimes like more intensive retreat in monasteries. And it's also like in a practical sense, it's kind of how we tend to measure our kind of our time spent as a monk. If we say like I've been ordained for this many years, usually we do it by pansa. So like for myself, like this last pansa was my 12th pansa or vasa.
Congratulations. So what's the difference between vasa and pansa then? Because that's what I thought vasa was.
Yeah, it's the same. It's the same.
I see.
Yeah, same.
Okay.
Same.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, there are quite a few very good stories about Ajahn Tongrat that weren't mentioned. So they say that he was quite a very eccentric kind of monk with sometimes kind of a bit unusual or kind of like outlandish behavior sometimes. I think the other story that I remember, other than the one that Ajahn Sudhiro just mentioned, I think there's one time where they were going up a hill or something on alms round, and then Ajahn Mun's like bowl, he ended up dropping his bowl or something, and it started rolling down the hill, and it's kind of like they have so much the other monks have so much respect for Ajahn Mun that his bowl is almost something that's like sacred or something. They don't even want to touch it. And as it's rolling down the hill, like Ajahn Tongrat's in the back of the line, and then he just stomps his foot on it, like to stop it. Just steps on it, which is like in Thailand is like the foot is like the dirtiest. You don't ever touch anything with your foot, and it's just like using his foot to stop like this kind of sacred object. I can't remember if Ajahn Mun praised him for that, but he, but it's kind of these funny stories.